Starting as we always do with the Thursday night game, the Colts versus the Texans. The Colts jumped out in this one, as you recall, 24-0. No team has ever led after the first quarter on a Thursday game in the NFL by more points than the Colts did, up 24-0 on the road, no less. And then you combine that with the fact that there have only been 30 games in NFL history, dating back to the foundation of the league, where a team led by 24 points or more after the first quarter. None of those teams ever lost. So while the Houston Texans battled admirably and brought this game a lot closer, of course, they still never were able to pull out the victory, and it would have been the first time that had ever happened if they were able to write history from that perspective. Now, there were some positive takeaways from this Texans team. It's going to be very interesting to see how they play on Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road, because you take those two teams, and I know we'll talk about this later, but both of those teams, the Houston Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers, were sitting at 3-2, and I thought both those teams were kind of shaky in that 3-2 record. I don't think they were necessarily deserving of being above 500. They were definitely questionable in that capacity. And at this point in time, they lost both of those games, dropped to 3-3 against division opponents. Had they won, had the Houston Texans won or the Steelers won, they would have been 4-2 with another victory over division opponent, even bigger for Houston because they would have beaten the division leader in Indianapolis. Now those teams are both 3-3. Must-win game for both of them on Monday night. We'll hear what the statistics from NFLproject.com show for how bad each of those teams need it on Monday night. But getting back to this Houston game versus the Colts, the thing I was surprised and impressed with Houston, granted, much of this came later in the game, but their efficiencies on first and second down, they were actually the best team in the league at that early down success rate offensively this past weekend. Now, again, it didn't occur when they needed it to in the first quarter, and of course the Colts playing a softer defense late allowed them to get to that number. So take it with a grain of salt, but I was impressed that they were actually able to have a little bit more success there than they have in the past. The problem for them came on third down. They were only 13% on third down conversions. That was one of the worst marks of any team this past weekend. So that was a terrible mark from the Texans, and that's one of the reasons why they were punting so often and giving the ball back to the Indianapolis Colts, who controlled the ball for 37 minutes, the fifth largest time of possession differential in any game this past weekend. The Indianapolis Colts, their offense looked good. It got the lead early, obviously, that helped them. They still turned the ball over a couple times. Andrew Luck threw an interception. They lost a fumble. Andrew Luck did not have his best day, only 57% completions. 8.3 yards per attempt was good, but still only ninth best in the league this weekend. They could not run the ball against the Houston Texans, only ran for 2.7 yards per carry, whereas the Texans ran for 5.3 yards per carry. Now, again, you have to take some of these numbers with a bit of grain of salt. Indianapolis playing a softer defense is going to allow the Texans to have more success on the ground, especially late in that game in the second half, et cetera, because they're just trying not to give up a quick, big score. So take that into consideration. But overall, this game, I think a very solid start, a very strong win for the Colts that they needed to get to put themselves in the position that they're in right now, where they're sitting at 4-2 and well on their way to win that division as long as they can take care of business over the Houston Texans once they face that team at home later this season. They now host the Cincinnati Bengals, who are off that epic tie, which we will actually talk about next. So on to that game, Cincinnati Bengals versus the Carolina Panthers. And again, guys, we're moving in order down the list. You can follow along on the client-only cheat sheet that I provide to look at all these stats and follow with me as I explain them. And if anybody wants to get a copy of this, that stat sheet is available to all the clients that are on board. So at any rate, this was a game, granted, it did go to overtime, and they played all 15 minutes of overtime, and as a result, we're going to see inflated totals, which is one of the reasons why looking at totals is just a moronic stat to look at when you're talking about a team's total yards allowed or total yards gained or even first downs gained for that matter. But we pull out some of those stats as well as look at efficiencies. But both these teams gained 29 first downs, so it was as dead even there as it was on the scoreboard, 37 apiece. Quite frankly, this score did surprise me. I was going to look at this game heading into it, and I was taking the position that I didn't think the Carolina Panthers offense would have as much success against the Cincinnati defense. I thought with the Bengals getting Vontaze Burfict back, that their run defense would be better, and because obviously the run defense looked terrible, one of the worst in the league to begin with, but that guy's missed a few weeks, and they played the Patriots last week who ran all over him, set up the pass. I didn't think that was going to happen this week, and I was definitely wrong on that assumption. The Carolina Panthers were able to run for 147 total yards. Now, that only came at 4.3 yards per carry, so that was only 10th in the league. It wasn't as if the Carolina Panthers ran right through this defense, but they were getting down into the Bengals red zone often due to big plays that they were getting, occasionally in the run game, occasionally in the pass game. When you look at the averages, the average yards per pass were only 6.2 for Carolina's offense. The average yards per rush was only 4.3 for their run game. So those numbers aren't all that surprising or impressive. But somehow they got down into the Bengals red zone 7 times in this game. They scored 4 touchdowns on those 7 trips. The Bengals only got down into the Panthers red zone 4 times and scored twice on those red zone trips. So lots of trips into the opposing red zone. Overall, though, this Bengals team, I mean, if you take the Bengals and you say, okay, you're going to get 6.2 yards per rush, and Andy Dalton is going to complete 77% of his passes, Keep in mind, both of those were the best in the NFL this entire week. Andy Dalton went 33 of 43 for 77% completion. If you take that and the run game gaining 6.2 yards per rush, how do you not walk away with a win at home? And the answer is the defense. The defense just was not there. This was a strength of this team over the past few seasons. The offense did what they had to do to win games, and when they had the opportunity, Jay Gruden really let them pile up statistics, and they beat teams by 20, 30 points and whatnot. But this team really was good because of their defense, and now we've seen for 2 consecutive weeks this defense kind of vanishing, allowing Cam Newton, without any running backs really, to gain 4.3 yards per carry. Now, some of that was Cam Newton running the ball, but the Bengals have to know that. They have to game plan for that. But it's not like you're out allowing a ton of yardage there, but the Panthers did just enough to set things up so that Cam Newton was able to complete passes down the field and be productive in the passing game. He threw 2 touchdown passes, and they ran for 2 touchdown passes. And some of the other stats for the Bengals, just pretty shocking. I mean, they went 63% on third downs. That's number 1 in the NFL. They had the 6th best early down success rate. So the reality is a very bad outcome of this game for the Cincinnati Bengals. A game they definitely should have been able to put away at home, but because of that defense, they were unable to do that. And as a result, they have a tie on the record, which, by the way, is as good as a loss for anybody who's betting these regular season wins under, which I have the Panthers under, and they've certainly been surprising me so far this year. But the fact that they didn't improve to 4-2 and still only have 3 wins through 6 games is something I'll take at this point, given their hot start to the year. Moving on to a very strong divisional battle at 1 p.m., and that was the Bills versus the Patriots. This is a game I was looking at the Bills on the side for this one, and initially it looked like it was a game that they were going to be able to do some things in, but then we started to see a turnover, and then we saw another turnover, and you cannot beat Tom Brady when you throw interceptions and turn the ball over. And this was a game that was a 6-point game after the second quarter. It was tied after the first quarter. It was a 6-point game after the second quarter. It was a 9-point game after the third quarter. And ultimately, they lost by 15 points. The reason they lost by 15 points, twofold. Number 1, turnovers. They had 3. They got 0 takeaways from the Patriots. You're not going to beat the Patriots and Tom Brady -3 in turnover margin. It's just not going to happen. Even if you go 3 of 3 in the red zone like the Buffalo Bills did, you're just not going to be able to beat them. And then number 2, passing defense. The Bills did a great job of shutting down the Patriots' rushing offense. The Patriots ran for 1.9 yards per carry. That was 30th in the league, dead last. No other team ran for fewer yards per carry than the New England Patriots. So tremendous job in shutting that down. However, you then allow Tom Brady to pass for 73% completions, 9.4 yards per attempt, post a 138 passer rating. He throws 4 touchdown passes. He's sacked only twice. Now, 2 times sacking Brady is okay. I mean, it's better than none. Obviously, they're hoping to get multiple sacks, so they got a couple, but he had time. They used the run game just enough, even though it wasn't effective, to set things up. And more than anything, horrible passing coverage, horrible decision-making from that Buffalo Bills secondary. I don't know if you guys watched this game at all, but there was a play, and they cut in on the highlights, and Bill Cowher just given a highlight for this game. I saw it when I was watching the Channel 702 on DirecTV, and they were going back and forth. This game was that commercial, and they cut into another game to show the highlight. And this DB from the Bills just literally shoved I think it was Edelman, over in the end zone. Didn't even go for the ball. It was like a 40-yard bomb by Tom Brady. And I don't even know if Edelman catches the ball or not. Before the ball even has a chance to get there, this DB just stops looking back towards the ball, just looks directly at Edelman and shoves him right off of his feet. Obviously, that's like giving Tom Brady 7 points there to get the ball first and goal at the goal line. Of course, they're going to score a touchdown there. So just a dumb play by that cornerback. I have no clue what he was thinking. Overall, I'd say my takeaways from this game were the Patriots' passing offense is getting some life. Now, they were without their starting center, and they only ran for 1.9 yards per carry, but they were able to get enough done out of that passing game, figure out ways to protect Tom Brady enough, things that they had not done the prior few weeks. I was very impressed by that performance out of that team. And certainly looking to see if that's able to carry forward moving forward. We know that they play again this upcoming weekend on Thursday night against the New York Jets, so we'll have to see if Brady continues to get that same pass protection and execute that passing offense. Gronkowski looks a lot better, so this offense looks like it's coming together at the right time. Buffalo Bills, their takeaways, I like their red zone efficiency. They were very good on third down, 53%. That was 6th best in the league, but when you look at their run game, they could not really run the ball on the New England Patriots, only 3 yards per carry, so that was 26th in the league this past weekend. That did not help Kyle Orton's cause at all. And they fumbled the ball twice, lost both times, had an interception. So, again, sloppy with the ball offensively, and I just felt like there wasn't very good communication between Orton and some of the wide receivers on some of the pass patterns. So they've got some work to clean up. There were some positives. I like how they shut down the run game, but they definitely have some work to do there. And next time they play the Patriots, I mean, you've got to know this by now, you can't turn the ball over 3 times. It's got to be more about ball security and efficient play calling rather than Kyle Orton just hanging in the pocket for so long, getting sacked, fumble the ball. You know, it's just sometimes these decisions, I don't know if it's the route combination and Orton wasn't seeing things well, if it was the play call, what exactly he was looking at, but he just seemed to hang in the pocket forever. He was sacked 5 times. Just dumb. Orton is not a mobile quarterback. You've got to get the ball out of his hands much quicker than that, so they've got to work on that offense a bit. Browns versus the Steelers. This was the game, and I mentioned this earlier on the news and notes section at the top, but some of these outcomes were just bizarre to me. Not that I didn't think that the Browns could win this game. I certainly did. I was not on the Steelers in any way, shape, or form on this one. My information, my data was leaning towards the Browns to get the win in this game, and so that's kind of what I was rolling with in terms of my assumption heading into this game. But the Steelers, for them to lose 31-10, for them not to have more than 3 points headed into the fourth quarter, that's what is more surprising to me. A lot of these outcomes, like I said earlier, it's not necessarily this team won or that team won. It's the manner in which they won. So let's get into that. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense got into the Cleveland Browns red zone 3 times and came away with 0 touchdowns. They got into goal to go twice and came away with 0 touchdowns. On the flip side, the Browns got into the Steelers red zone 3 times, same as the Steelers, but scored touchdowns every single time. So they had a perfect red zone conversion rate. The Steelers obviously could not get any worse than 0 of 3. When you look at what Ben Roethlisberger did, not very good. 50% completions on 42 pass attempts. That's not going to win you a whole lot of games. 5.3 yards per attempt. So you're not talking about big plays. You're talking about when he gets the ball down. Obviously, this is hindered by some of the completion percentage, but I'm going to get into that a little bit when we talk about Brian Hoyer. And then the 64 passer rating, that was 27th in the league this past weekend. He threw 1 passing touchdown. He also threw an interception. Just not a very good day for Ben Roethlisberger when you think about what he is historically been able to do against the Cleveland Browns defense. He was sacked, but only twice, so that really shouldn't have affected him that significantly throughout the course of the day, but he was not playing very well. You look on the run game side of things, they only ran for 4.3 yards per carry. That wasn't terrible because the Browns only ran for 4.2 yards per carry. So, and the turnover margin was dead even. What you have here is you have a Cleveland Browns offense which was hitting on big plays. So let's talk about Brian Hoyer. He only completed 47% of his passes, so that was actually worse than Ben. But he only threw 17 pass attempts. He completed 8 of 17. So whereas Ben Roethlisberger passed 42 times, Hoyer only passed 17 times. But in those 17 pass attempts, he threw for 210 yards. Even that low completion percentage, he was moving the ball very far down the field, allowed him to get a 12.4 yards per attempt, which was far and away best in the NFL on Sunday. And that 112 passer rating, of course, because he did end up throwing 1 passing touchdown. Now, they ran it in 3 times because they got so close to the end zone. They called some run plays, but it could have even been a higher passer rating if he had thrown at least 1 more touchdown. Very efficient day from Brian Hoyer, moving the ball very far down the field, which was impressive with the aggressiveness out of that offense. I like that a lot out of Shanahan. When you look at their early down success rate numbers and some of their other metrics, both teams are very similar from the respect of converting on third downs. Both were about 36-38%. Cleveland was a little bit better in early down success rate. They were 9th best, whereas the Steelers were 18th. But overall, the rest of the game, it really was pretty much a wash. I mean, like I said, even turnover margin, even completion percentage essentially, even on the run game in terms of yards per carry. The difference being big plays from Cleveland and efficiency in the red zone. Lack of big plays from the Steelers, inefficiency in the red zone. Now, still, that said, I mean, a 31-3 game. They were up by 28 points at one point in time, at the largest lead of the game. They end up winning 31-10. You wouldn't expect that efficiency in the red zone and the lack of big plays would lead the Steelers to only score 3 points, but that is the driving factor there. If you get down to the red zone, guess what? 3 times, you should be able to walk away with at least 9 points right there. But they only kicked 1 field goal, and they didn't score any touchdowns from inside the red zone. So going forward on 4th down, not getting it, just a bad performance from the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Very good performance from the Cleveland Browns offense. Should this Cleveland Browns defense be graded up for that performance? That's something that I'm going to obviously look at. I'm not typically high on the Browns defense. Look at what Charlie Whitehurst did to them last week, a combination of Jake Locker and Charlie Whitehurst. Threw a ton of passes and scored touchdowns on this team last weekend, up and down the field until late in the game where they played a lot more conservatively and allowed the Cleveland Browns to stage that miraculous come from behind victory. So we'll see what the future holds for the Browns. They go down and play the winless Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend, and as I mentioned before, the Steelers play on Monday Night Football at home against the Houston Texans. Ravens at the Buccaneers. This is such a one-sided game, and we've been seeing a lot of those recently. Again, remember my note at the top about some of these teams just not showing up. In this game, the Baltimore Ravens certainly came to play down in Tampa and just swarmed this Buccaneers defense and offense for that matter at the start. They were up 20-0 at the end of the first quarter, and let's go ahead and talk about Joe Flacco a little bit. Normally, this guy struggles a little bit on the road. He obviously struggled big time last week against the Colts. What does he do here? Let's go over some of these advanced metrics. In the red zone, in the first quarter, he completed 5 of 8 passes, including 4 for touchdowns. That was better than his year-to-date performance in the first quarter all season long. Also, his QBR in the red zone over the course of the game was 99.99 out of 100, which is obviously very difficult to do. He completed all 7 of his first down pass attempts and averaged 13.4 yards per attempt on those. And then when he did get into third down, he was 6 for 8, including 3 touchdown passes. So 8 of his passes on third down, 3 of those 8 went for touchdowns. 3 of the touchdown passes on the day were passes that traveled at least 15 yards downfield, which was his season total coming into this game. And he was extremely accurate on play action and basically everything else. If you look at the stats, there's 72% completion, 10.6 yards per attempt, 146 passer rating. These are all top 3 for any quarterback this past weekend. Combined that the Ravens also ran for 4.8 yards per attempt, and which is impressive considering the fact that they're up late and just running the ball just to try to end the game, essentially. And this team went 7.4 yards per play. That was number 1 in the NFL. You look at the early on success rate, they finished 8th, and they were also 5th when they did get to third down, 5 of 5 inside the red zone, 2 of 3 on field goal attempts, 6 touchdowns on the day, 5 sacks. It was just complete domination all across the board. There's nothing really much else to be said for them. When you talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a lot of love heading into this game for Mike Glennon, and the one thing that Mike Glennon did well was push the ball down the field heading into this game. That was one of his traits. It was one of his skills, was his arm strength. But in this game, another poor performance when you talk about a 79 passer rating, 6.3 yards per attempt, 55% completions, and 1 interception. Those numbers, all the stats that I was just listing there, 20th or worst in the NFL this past weekend. And then you couple that with the fact that the team only went 17% on third downs. That was the 4th worst of any team this past weekend. And you can understand why this team did not even stand a chance, especially when their defense is giving up a lot of efficiency and a lot of big plays to the Baltimore Ravens. It's not that the Baltimore Ravens were just efficient. It's not that the Baltimore Ravens were really big play, but not all that efficient. They combined both in this perfect storm down in Tampa that really projected them to a large lead, and they held on and continued building that lead throughout the rest of the game. Moving west, the Redskins visited the Arizona Cardinals. This was a game that you only saw 1 red zone conversion in 4 trips to the red zone. So right there, that was the worst red zone performance of any team, any game this past weekend when you're combining the 2 offenses and the defenses. That was the worst performance there. Now, looking a little bit closer at the Arizona Cardinals, we do know that they made a quarterback change. They got rid of Drew Stanton because Carson Palmer was back. He was, quote-unquote, fit enough to play by Bruce Arians having warmed him up. And what did we see? Well, heading into this game, I have been telling you on this podcast that I like Drew Stanton in this offense. He's not very efficient. His completion percentage is right around 49-50%. But he passes big time down the field, opens up things for the run game underneath, and will hit on some of those big plays to give the Cardinals a lot of quick points. And then when he misses, those are incompletions. And obviously, if you're passing the ball on 2nd and 9, way down the field and you miss, the clock stops, and now you've got 39, so obviously you're going to be passing the ball again, trying to gain a first down, so at least 9-10 yards down the field again. So a lot more passing down the field. Carson Palmer, I surmised heading into this game, telling some people that I don't think he's going to be able to go deep as much, but I think he's going to be much more effective in the mid-range game, and I think that's probably going to break even in terms of how this performance is going to go, in terms of the total, in terms of the Cardinals. And sure enough, Carson Palmer, 64% completions when you look at what he did, so much higher than what Drew Stanton was, down at 50%. But Carson Palmer was only 5.5 yards per attempt, and that was 24th in the league out of 30 quarterbacks. So that was not very good out of Carson Palmer. He was getting a lot of things closer to the line of scrimmage, and as a result, really didn't open anything up in the run game. The Cardinals were only able to run for 3.2 yards per attempt. So in a nutshell, as a whole, I actually view, when you're looking at the Cardinals moving forward, I actually view Carson Palmer as a slight downgrade in terms of their ability to, number one, pull out games and pull ahead from opponents. I don't see them quite as explosive in that nature. And number two, from a totals perspective, you know, he's much more Larry Fitzgerald. He's not very much Michael Floyd deep down the field. That plays into your fantasy stuff as well, but that was definitely something that was completely noticeable. You look at some of the advanced metrics and analytics when you're breaking things down for Palmer, 20 of 27 attempts that traveled 10 or less yards down the field. So he's very efficient on short passes. But on 17 passes that traveled more than 10 yards down the field, he only went 8 of 17. So that's actually very similar completion percentage to what we saw from Drew Stanton, about 50%. But Carson Palmer's not throwing very many of those down the field. So passes less often down the field, about the same completion rate as Drew Stanton on those passes. He's just much better on the short stuff, reading defensive coverages and figuring out what to do with the ball quickly. Larry Fitzgerald obviously had a great day pass receiving, and that's one of the guys that Palmer really trusts to get the ball out quick. Prior to this game, however, the Cardinals were second in the NFL. They averaged 6 or more throws of 20-plus yards down the field. So Palmer only threw down the field 20-plus yards twice this game, and both of those were incompletion. So you can see right there, 6 per game without Palmer in there, and now he's back with a nerve issue, and they only throw down there twice and don't complete anything. So that's not going to open up anything in the run game or help them out in terms of putting up big chunk plays. Now, like I've been saying, in terms of what he's doing against the blitz and being able to read things quickly and accurately. Against the blitz, he was 10 of 13 for 101 yards. So very good when the Redskins decided to blitz him, figuring out where to go with the ball quickly. When he had time in the pocket and was not being blitzed, he only went 18 of 31 for 149 yards. So again, 149 yards. It's not down the field on 31 pass attempts, so he's not really throwing the ball down the field at all, which I said before. When you look at the Redskins, they actually did not play a very bad game overall. The key for them was these turnovers. Again, 3 interceptions, 4 total turnovers on the day. The Cardinals don't have a single turnover. So the reality is I think the Washington Redskins played a little bit better offense than did the Arizona Cardinals. When you look at the Redskins, 8.8 yards per pass attempt from Cousins compared to Palmer's 5.5. When you look at the run attempts, the Redskins ran for 4.2 yards per carry. Not great, 12th in the league, but better than the Cardinals' 3.2. So overall, on a per-play basis, Redskins 7.1, Cardinals 4.7. So Redskins were being efficient with the ball, and they were also being very efficient on early down success rate. 21 first downs, only go to third down 10 times. Second best early down success rate in the league. Compare that to the Cardinals, 25th in early down success rate. They have 19 first downs, which are less than the Redskins, but they go to third down 17 times. The Redskins were just not very good on third down. They only completed 20% of their third downs in the first down. So that was a problem. And, both teams combined go 1 of 4 in the red zone, with the Cardinals going 0 of 2 and the Redskins going 1 of 2. You would think that with Carson Palmer there, that would improve, and they would at least be able to go 1 of 2 in the red zone, but that was not the case. So overall, 10-point victory for the Cardinals. 50 points were scored in this game in total, including a non-offensive touchdown, which was an interception return very late in that game to give Arizona the cover and send it over. One of the, several games that we saw late covers by favorites on the weekend. When you look at the Green Bay Packers versus Miami Dolphins, the best game of the week for me in terms of the most entertaining to watch, very back and forth type game. Neither team had a lead of over 7 points. Both teams led by 7 at one point throughout the game. Neither team led by more than 7. So a very competitive ball game. I really thought it was a tale of two halves. Breaking down this game from the Dolphins' perspective, my anticipation was that I saw the Green Bay Packers get run all over on versus the Chicago Bears a couple of weeks ago. I thought that run defense was primed to give up yards to the Miami Dolphins, and the Miami Dolphins just needed to focus on the run and set things up for some easy Ryan Tannehill stuff, not force anything, because the Green Bay Packers have some very good cornerbacks. They have some very good players in the secondary. So you really want to try to open things up with the run game. And the Packers did not do a very good job. The Dolphins did not do a very good job of opening things up early in terms of establishing a run and drawing defenders into the box. They were having Tannehill pass the ball way too much early in the game. He was not being very efficient. He ended up throwing 2 interceptions, and that led to them being down by 7 points at halftime. The defense played pretty well overall. The Green Bay Packers only completed 5.9 yards per pass for Aaron Rodgers. That's tremendous. That's holding that offense in check, that explosive, dynamic offense of the Green Bay Packers to only 5.9 yards per attempt. That's ridiculous. 57% completions. Again, solid effort out of the Miami Dolphins defense. And then they stuffed the run. 3.6 yards per carry for Eddie Lacy and company. That was 21st in the NFL. The run game for the Miami Dolphins really came alive late in that game. Miller was getting things going, cranking out some big chunk yardage, and the overall rush for 4.9 yards per carry was the 5th best. Had they started running a little bit earlier, I think not only would they have seen success, 2 other things would have happened. Number one, you would have controlled the clock. That Miami Dolphins defense was out on the field, the third most of any defense that was out on the field this past weekend. And it's down in South Florida. It was muggy and warm down there. You need to be out there on offense and forcing that Green Bay Packers defense to stay out there too. And it was the exact opposite. And so that was a big problem for the Miami Dolphins in terms of their inability to stay out on the field and control time of possession. That allowed that defense to get really run down when that defense of the Dolphins was out on the field so much. And that's what ultimately, I think, led to their loss. They were getting to Rodgers early in that game, but that pass rush had to keep rushing Aaron Rodgers. He had 42 pass attempts. That means 42 times they're trying to get up the field against him because the Packers had the ball for 37 minutes in that game, which is, again, like I said, the third most of any team. So they're controlling that game, getting up the field, and really putting strain on those pass rushers who ultimately you saw Aaron Rodgers make big plays in the pocket late in that game, scrambling all over the place, and that's what Aaron Rodgers just does. But when your pass rush is exhausted, it's a lot higher percentage that he's going to hit some of those plays down the field. Overall, though, Tannehill played better than he has in the past. Heading into that game in London, he was not playing well at all. From that game in London and then off the bye week, played very well against the Green Bay Packers. Offensively, their efficiency, they were third best in terms of early down success rate. It is quite amazing that this Miami Dolphins team turned the ball over 3 times, 2 interceptions and 1 fumble loss, and still were up at the end of this game. That speaks to their defensive effort and their ability to be very efficient in the second half in terms of what they were doing offensively. They should have, they made adjustments in that second half, but with Joe Philbin knowing the style of the Green Bay Packers, you should have rolled some of those adjustments in closer to middle of the first quarter, I would believe. Don't wait until the end of the second quarter at halftime to start making these adjustments. You have to understand what the goal is of the Packers defense heading into the game. You're very familiar with what they're probably going to try to do. I highly doubt that they did anything really different. They're going to try to stop your run, and they're going to hope that they play good coverage on Tannehill. They really, it's not like they're going to do all sorts of crazy things. It was just the play calling I thought was terrible from Philbin early in this game, set the Packers up in some very, very good positions defensively to succeed. And in the long run, I think the Dolphins outplayed them. They just had 3 turnovers, got no takeaways from the Packers. And that was the story of this game. A very fun, entertaining, exciting game. The Eagles and the Giants on Sunday night. This was just a mail-it-in game, basically, for Tom Coughlin. And if he was a rookie coach, he would be lambasted for a performance like this. But the biggest problem with him, for me, that I have is not the loss. The loss, hey, the Eagles came into this game really juiced up, ready to get some bad taste out of their mouth with their offensive performance the last couple of weeks. Really performed efficiently from the run game, first and foremost, running for 5.6 yards per carry, fourth best efficiency in terms of early down success rate on the day. So that is not what I would be disappointed with. What I would be disappointed with is your quarterback is going out there, and Eli Manning, and getting sacked over and over and over. Like I talked about in the Green Bay Packers game, and with Miami Dolphins, how do you not, at a minimum, make big-time adjustments at halftime to come out better prepared in the second half to get some things accomplished against this Eagles defense? This is the Philadelphia Eagles defense. I know they're at home, but this is not the 85 Bears. It's not the 2001 Baltimore Ravens. This is a Eagles defense that is one of the worst in the NFL in the preseason. They've showed that they're not very good this regular season so far. And the Giants offensively made them look like they were the steel curtain or something to that effect. It was a pathetic performance. Look at some of these statistics from the New York Giants. 28th in first down, they only had 12. 29th in early down success rate, only one team was worse. Second worst in third down conversion, only converted 14% of their third down. Only got into the Eagles' red zone once. That was that pass that they threw up to Victor Cruz, who was wide open in the end zone, getting ready to come down for 7 points at the start of the third quarter. His knee goes out on him. He doesn't catch the ball, obviously gets carted off the field. And from that point on, it's like they just decided, we're not going to try anything new here. Let's just get off the field. And everything just slowed down. I mean, there's no point at that time for the Eagles to continue with their high tempo offense to try to do anything. They had the game well in hand, so they only scored 7 more points in the rest of the game. And the Giants did nothing. They didn't pose any threat whatsoever in that second half. They made no adjustments in the quarterback position. Really surprising to me. Not the result of the Eagles get the cover, but the result of Eagles winning this game 27-0. The New York Giants offense doing nothing against the defense, not figuring out any type of adjustments. That's what bothers me a bit about this defense, about this offense performance from the New York Giants. Not figuring out anything that they could possibly do to show a little bit of success in the pass game, to open things up a little bit in the run game. It really was mind-boggling when I saw that game unfold. Having a lot of fun here breaking down these games because these games were very entertaining, very exciting, very different in some cases than what I potentially expected, and I'm sure a lot of people else out there potentially expected. Here's another one of those games, the Falcons versus the Bears. Went into this game anticipating terrible defense by both teams, efficient offense by both offenses, should be able to produce some points on the scoreboard in this game, and the Bears did what I expected pretty much. They put up 27 points on the scoreboard, 3 of 5 in the Falcons' red zone. Got them there 5 times, converted 3 of them. Jay Cutler, extremely efficient passing day, 9.7 yards per attempt, and they ran the ball. At the end, they were just running to just run out the clock, so this yardage number is a little bit deflated, but they rushed for 110 yards on 28 carries, that's 3.9 yards per attempt. Overall, even including that yards per play, 6.9 yards per play, 4th best in the NFL this past weekend. And you want to talk about some of the numbers here for Jay Cutler. He completed 5 of 7 passes down the field in terms of at least 15 yards down the field, 5 of 7 for 191 total yards, and that included a 74-yard pass that traveled 50 yards in the air to Alshon Jeffrey. Now, coming into this week, he was only connecting on 23% of passes traveling at least 15 yards in the NFL. That was the second worst of any quarterback in the league, and he had 11.8 QBR on those passes, which was the league's worst. And he really was able to turn it around through effective play action. The play action game was big. He completed 10 of 13 passes using play action for 174 yards and a touchdown. So that obviously helped. It was his best day as a play action passer in play action play calls since he's joined the Bears, since 2009. So very strong there. He also did very well against the Falcons' pressure. When the Falcons did decide to pressure him 13 times out of 43 dropbacks, he had a higher percentage than he's had in his completions any time this year, going 6 of 10 for 111 yards on those passes. And 5 of those passes led to either a first down or a touchdown. So very strong performance by Jay Cutler. I didn't expect anything less. The Falcons' defense is pretty much abysmal, one of, if not the worst in the entire NFL. They're not very good. On the flip side, I did not have high expectations about this Bears defense. And I saw a team that Aaron Rodgers just shredded a couple weeks previously. And this Bears defense, when you think about what their production was and what they allowed the Carolina Panthers to come back in that game. They allowed Cam Newton to have a huge day and put up 31 points, even though the team started off slow. So, Bears defense not looking good. And then you look at what the Falcons offense did here at home. Just ridiculous numbers here. Matt Ryan, only 51% completions. That was 26 out of 30 quarterbacks. The team got down to the Bears red zone 0 times in the entire game. 0. That's pretty obscene right there. When you talk about the Falcons' first downs, only 12 of those, 28th in the league. 28th on early down success rate offense. That was not good. Matt Ryan ended up having a 70 passer rating, which was pretty terrible. And the Falcons could not run the ball. Only 13 attempts, only 42 total yards. That's 3.2 yards per rush. So you ask yourself the question, is this the Falcons offense? Is it the Bears defense? I expected the Falcons offense might struggle with those replacement offensive linemen a couple weeks ago versus the Giants, but they did not. And ironically, that you put two and two together, you see, okay, well here, Nick Foles had a pretty good day, so maybe that was more so the Giants defense as opposed to the Falcons offense, and clearly against the Bears, who I don't view as a dominant defense by any stretch. The Bears really were able to get after Matt Ryan, sacked him 4 times, and just disrupted this passing game completely. They just were not on target the whole game. So that led to a very low score. They had to kick 2 field goals to even get to their 13 points. So they had 1 touchdown, that was a passing touchdown, and 2 field goals on the day. Only 13 points at home to this Bears defense. This was another game where, it's not that the Bears won surprised me. Their win did not surprise me, but the way that they did it surprised me. The way that the Falcons offense did not show up, couldn't do anything against this Bears defense, surprised me a lot. And now you have a Chicago Bears defense this upcoming week is going to play the Miami Dolphins, who I thought played a very good game last weekend. So that should be an interesting game up in Chicago. Whereas the Atlanta Falcons, this is a team that now has to go into Baltimore and play the red-hot Baltimore Ravens and play better at home. So, look out there for the Ravens offense, I would say. Moving on to the Denver Broncos versus the New York Jets. This was another one of those games where a last-second score really turned some things. It set the game. I don't know what total some people got, but I don't think it was much higher than 48. I think it actually was bet down towards the under, so another favorite and over combination when the Broncos, Talib got that pick 6 late in the game. The Jets just frustrate the hell out of me. I'm not even a fan of the team. I'm really a fan of no team in the NFL. I like to objectively look at every single team. But the Jets, I just don't get their deal with Geno Smith here. I posted up the metrics about how he doesn't throw the ball down the field, how his completion percentage is terrible. Combine those two things together, one of the worst in the NFL right now, the worst with a starting job in the NFL now that E.J. Manuel got benched. And once again, he completed only 53% of his passes and only 4.0 yards per pass attempt. 4 yards per pass attempt is 29th in the NFL. 53% completion, that's 24th in the NFL. That combination should not go hand in hand. If you're only going to complete 53% of your passes, your yards per attempt need to be a lot higher. I mean, look at Brian Hoyer this past week. He completed 47% of his passes, so a little bit less, but he had 12.4 yards per pass attempt. Geno is down at 4.0 yards per pass attempt. The passing game was not doing anything. The running game, one plays off another typically, and so in this case, I'm not sure if it was a bad run game, got no options in the pass game, or a bad pass game, got no options in the run game. But one thing's for sure, they passed the ball 43 times. They only ran at 15. They only ran at 15. They were only getting 2.1 yards per carry, second worst in the NFL. Therefore, when you combine their pass and their rush numbers, they were 3.3 yards per play. That was dead worst in the NFL. I understand this is Denver Broncos, but the ironic thing about this game was I gave you guys the blueprint for what I saw in terms of beating the Denver Broncos, about time of possession, keeping Peyton Manning off the field, converting plays and sustaining drives down the field. And when you look at this game, the Denver Broncos actually punted one more time than the New York Jets did. The New York Jets were actually covering this game at the end of the game, but for that pick 6. The New York Jets were terrible pretty much everywhere across the board. They allowed Peyton Manning to throw, and let's look at their defense, for 67% completion to 116 passer rating. But they cut off a lot of the huge downfield plays, so Peyton's average overall was only 6.7 yards per attempt. That was 17th in the NFL. They held the Broncos to just 44% on third down and 20th in the league on early down success rate offense. So the Broncos offense didn't do a whole lot of damage in this one. I mean, consider they did score 24 points, and they tacked on another 7 due to that non-offensive touchdown return, but the Jets were there despite playing terribly. So that had to have frustrated the Jets fans immensely during this game. And ironically, if they even had a little bit better performance from Geno, this could have been a completely different ballgame. But they got nothing out of Geno, nothing out of the run game. And it's like, I can understand Rex Ryan to an extent. If they don't have a backup quarterback who's going to win games, then just ride Geno Smith and maybe try to blame it on him and save your job. I don't know, but I don't think there's any way that that's going to happen. They were the guys who brought Geno Smith in, and Geno Smith has been terrible for this team. And it looks like Rex is going to his grave with Geno as well, because those guys, I don't think, can last the season. This team is losing as a result of their quarterback, and they're not deciding to make a move there. So that just speaks volumes about who they got on the roster to throw passes and the coaching, I believe. Moving to the Raiders and the Chargers. Another game here where I was very surprised, not by the result. There was a lot of angles and stuff looking at the Raiders as being a team who could be live in this game. But the way I envisioned, I had no involvement in this game from a betting perspective side or total, but the way I envisioned this one playing out is with a 4-string center for the San Diego Chargers. The Oakland Raiders defense was going to be able to put a little bit more pressure on Phillip Rivers and slow that offense down a little bit. And the Chargers, very good defense year to date, was going to be able to ultimately stop the Raiders' offense, which is not very good. But I envisioned a lower scoring game where maybe, the Raiders do cover this thing. That's how I kind of saw it playing out in my head. But when you look at the scoreboard and you watch it live, it was big time downfield passing from the Oakland Raiders. Carr was throwing the ball down the field, 8.3 yards per attempt. We know that the Chargers have been winning by Phillip Rivers. And once again, a lot of people thought, Brandon Oliver's here for the run game. We're going to get some run yardage from our defense, from our offense rather, and we're going to really be able to do some damage. But the run game was not there. Once again, only 3.5 yards per carry. So it was up to Phillip Rivers. He was 8.8 yards per pass attempt, 120 passer rating, only 63% completion. So, okay, about middle of the road, but 8.8 yards per attempt. At least he's pushing the ball down the field. 3 passing touchdowns, no turnovers at all for the Chargers, which obviously helped them win this game because the Raiders did have 1 turnover. But the Raiders, able to run the ball for 5.7 yards per carry, able to pass the ball for 8.3 yards per carry. They had 7.3 yards per play, second best in the NFL. And they went 2 for 2 in the Chargers' red zone. So I was very surprised at that. We knew heading into the season that there were question marks surrounding the Chargers' defense, but it had been playing very good to start the season. So I'm very interested to look a little bit deeper at some of their defensive numbers here, and try to analyze where I see this defense going, because they showed some holes against Carr, and this kind of, I don't want to say talent depleted, but they really just don't have massively talented playmakers on the Raiders that you're going to think, hey, we're going to consistently be able to gain 8.3 yards per pass and 5.7 yards per rush, with 2 older running backs in the mix who haven't really done much at all this season, and a rookie quarterback throwing to a lackluster group of wide receivers. So it really was shocking. Moving to the biggest game of the day, and obviously one of the most entertaining games, I'd say. I really enjoyed watching that Dolphins-Packers game. This game was just as entertaining. I think I was definitely another outcome that I was quite surprised at. I did not, much like the Raiders and the Chargers, it's not that I didn't think the Cowboys could play with the Seahawks. It's that I assumed and believed that the Seahawks would be able to put this game out at home. I figured that they would be able to get the victory at home. And one of the things that I was a little bit worried about heading into this game was, if the Cowboys choose to run the ball too much early in the game and are not seeing success, will they allow Tony Romo to open it up quickly? Because I've said for a while now, ever since before the Redskins game a couple Mondays ago, that Seattle is exploitable in the secondary. If you can pass the ball on them down Richard Sherman's side of the field, you should be able to make some plays and open things up on the left side of the field as well. And in this game here, one of the things that I was impressed by is that the Cowboys came out and had success running the ball early, and that really set everything else up. Seahawks usually stuff the run and make you go to plan B, which is either keep running it or try to pass it, and generally then you're playing right into their hands because they get the lead. That did not happen in this game. The Seahawks did lead by 3 after the first half, but the Cowboys led by 7 at halftime. And once the Cowboys led by 7 at halftime, I saw the way that this game was shaping up in terms of the success they were having on the ground. DeMarco Murray ran for 4.4 yards per carry in terms of what this Dallas Cowboys running game was able to do, 162 total yards on the ground for them. And at halftime, I decided to play the Dallas Cowboys plus the 7 on the second half line, and that's a play, assuming that they were going to get the outright victory, because I had some on the Seahawks getting the outright victory in the teaser, and I just felt that at this point, I think the Cowboys could win this game. So that was the impetus for that play. But you talk about surprising results. It's not the how. It's not the result. It's the how and the why. Dallas controlled the ball 37 minutes in this game. Second biggest time of possession differential against a supposedly, what we know, a very good Seahawks defense. And on the road in Seattle, where that's hard to do. It's very hard to control the ball in Seattle like the Cowboys were able to do. So just a tremendous balance. If you want to look at their game plan here and the way that they were passing the ball, 37 rushes, 32 passes for Dallas. 66% completions on those 32 passes, which is solid. 7.5 yards per attempt, which is not bad either. It's not super far down the field, but it's gaining yardage in chunks at times in that pass game. 100% passer rating, and the Dallas Cowboys still lost the turnover battle. So, I mean, you just, the more you look at this, the more impressed you are by this Cowboys win. You go into Seattle, you lose the turnover battle. That alone should prevent you from winning the game. You still have the second largest, you're controlling the ball for 38 minutes roughly, time of possession, second biggest in the league, on the road. You're running for 162 yards, 4.4 yards per attempt. It was basically ridiculous numbers out of that Cowboys offense against this defense. When you let's look a little bit deeper at Tony Romo, some of the things that he did. He took an average of 2.9 seconds before he released the ball. That was the highest average in a game this season and the highest that the Seattle Seahawks have allowed. What that means is his offensive line was giving him protection. So he was able to let routes develop down the field. When that happens, you're breaking that secondary down even further. They're so accustomed to playing their zones and their lanes for a certain amount of time because they know that pass rush is going to get to your quarterback after a couple seconds. So they can cheat up, they can do whatever they need to do. And in this case, Romo was able to hold the ball for a while longer to let routes develop. Really, really helped. Tony Romo completed 10 of 15 third down passes for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. 9 of those passes were converted first downs. That was the highest total against the Seattle Seahawks defense since the beginning of 2013. They had that huge 3rd and 20 conversion to Terrence Williams. That was a huge swing in the likelihood of them winning that game. It was incredible. And Romo was actually the first quarterback since 2012 to complete 3 passes of at least 20 yards in the air on a pass against Seattle. So he was very effective in the short yardage stuff, and what I mean by that is 16 of 19 throws that traveled 10 or less yards in the air were completed for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he only missed 3 of these shorter throws, which normally is not the way that you beat the Seattle Seahawks. But you have to consider the way that they were able to set that up is what made them effective. They didn't come out and just start trying to do the short yardage stuff and or run their head into a brick wall. because they're able to gain a little bit of yardage on the ground, and because then they're able to take a few of these bigger plays in the secondary, now you open everything up. Now you have the ability to go 16 of 19 on short throws. Your offensive coordinator is figuring out routes that you can call that are closer to the line of scrimmage that are going to see a high level of success because you've given this defense conflict. You've given them the fact that we can run the ball and gain 4.5 yards a carry. We could pass the ball down the field on you and we're not scared to do that, or we'll just go short. And so you open up a lot of different things there, and most of the time opponents of the Seahawks are only seeing success at best in one of those areas. Maybe they're hitting a couple of deep passes, and that's it. Maybe they're having a few good passing day on short yardage stuff, but they're rarely going to be able to run the ball, short yardage pass and deep pass the way that the Cowboys did on Sunday. Extremely impressed. Jump to the flip side, the Seattle Seahawks offense. This was as big to me a surprise as seeing the way that the Cowboys offense really took it to the Seattle Seahawks defense. You know, I've been on record as saying I have big hopes and I'm really up on Russell Wilson, but this was either just a bad game from him or it was maybe a sign that this guy is not the guy to lead you when it falls onto your shoulders. When it falls entirely onto his shoulders, maybe he's not the guy. But it's hard to throw those types of blanket statements out there when you look at the time of possession, and here's why I'm going to say that. The Seahawks are at their best when they can have balance, run, and pass. We know that. They only had 18 rushes in this entire game. And those rushes gained 4.4 yards per carry. So the same as what the Dallas Cowboys did, 8th best in the NFL. So it's not that their run game got shut down. It's that they had so few opportunities. The game was close throughout. If you look at the biggest lead by the Seattle Seahawks in the game was 10 points. The biggest lead by the Dallas Cowboys was 7 points. And that was at the very end of the game. So this was a game that was close throughout, yet for whatever reason, Darren Bevel was calling 28 pass attempts for Russell Wilson, only 18 run attempts. So a little bit of imbalance there. They basically ran for the same yards per play as they passed. They passed for 4.5. They ran for 4.4. 4.5 yards per attempt is 28th in the league, third worst this past weekend out of 30 teams. He only completed 50% of his passes. When you combine 50% of your pass completions, only 4.5 yards per attempt, we're entering Geno Smith territory in this discussion. Not that I'm comparing the two in terms of the skill level. I'm just saying the stats on that in this game is what Geno Smith averages over the course of the season. It was very bad performance. He threw one interception. He threw no passing touchdowns. So his passer rating rather was only 48. Again, horrible. Second worst passer rating on the day. Only Teddy Bridgewater was worse. So this team was 30th, dead last in terms of total first downs at 9. We know they didn't have the ball much, but their early down success rate was miserable. They only got 9 first downs, and they had 13 third down attempts on the day. That means you're getting the third down an awful lot. You're hardly ever bypassing third down. Just a bad performance from this offense in general. I'm pretty sure that this Cowboys defense is not as good as what they looked here. I've been saying it for a little while now, and eventually I'm going to stop saying that if they continue to prove me wrong. But for the time being, I'm still going to stand by the fact that you are going to see at some point this team falter because of the defense. And I just don't see the players there. But I got to hand it to them. They're playing out of their minds very well in the scheme, and it's all being driven by the efficiency of the offense and the time of possession, as you can see here. 38 minutes time of possession on the road against a great team like Seattle. You're putting that Seattle offense in situations they're rarely in, needing to make plays happen, worrying about getting to third down because if you punt the ball, you're never going to get it back. All of these things factor into a quarterback's mind, into a play caller's mind, and it really screws up. It might not screw things up for a team like the Rams or the Bills or teams that are used to being in those situations. But when you take a team like the Seattle Seahawks, who is not used to being in those situations, and put them into those situations, it will really affect them big time. So very surprising result to this game for me. Not on the scoreboard, a little bit on the scoreboard, but mostly in the way that this thing played out. When you look at the stats and the metrics here, very surprising stuff out of the Seahawks offense and the Cowboys offense and both defenses. Every single aspect of this game has some wrinkles and some really interesting nuggets to talk about, obviously, as we just went over. Let's think through some of these injuries. Not a ton of information right now, but let's attack some of the high-level ones, starting with the Cincinnati Bengals, who saw Ray Maliuga, their linebacker, go down with a hamstring injury. His status is uncertain, but teams certainly can't afford to lose him given their current defensive struggles, especially with stopping the run of late. Cleveland Browns, big one for them there is the loss of center Alex Mack. Broke his leg out for the season. That really hurts this young offensive line, as we know how important centers are in the game. They also lost defensive lineman Monty Bryant, who was out for the season, had to get surgery on his knee. Dallas Cowboys, big loss for them. Doug Free, he's going to be out for a few weeks. Broke some bones in his foot, I believe, up in Seattle. So that offensive line had been playing very well. Now they're faced with their first big injury along that line. How well will they be able to overcome it? Talk about Denver Broncos. Their big loss there was Danny Trevathan. This guy just came back from a broken tibia, I believe, which is your shin bone, in the offseason, and now he hurt his knee. I don't know if it's the same leg or not, but it is amazing how the human body, everything builds on one another up the body. So if you have a messed up leg or foot, you're trying to rehab that. A lot of times you'll mess something up higher up on the leg or your back or something like that later on, and that's could be what happened with Danny. I'm not sure if it's the same leg where he hurt his leg and now he's hurt his knee or not. With the New England Patriots, two big losses they suffered before their big game versus the Jets. They lost Gerard Mayo, linebacker, and Stephen Ridley, running back. Both of these guys out for the season with knee injuries. Although I don't know if Gerard Mayo is 100% out for the season, but he's likely out for the season. The Jets lost two players themselves for the season. Brian Winters with a knee and Dee Milner with his Achilles. They were really hoping to get Dee Milner back. He missed several games to start the year. Finally comes back, hurts himself. Again, kind of the similar theme to Danny Trevathan's injury. I don't know if it's the same leg or whatnot as what he's hurt before, but these guys, unfortunately, they rehab, come back from an injury, and their body might not be 100% ready to take the beating that NFL players take in a game basis, and he's now torn his Achilles. So he's out. That really will hurt that secondary for the Jets even more. Giants, Victor Cruz, he's out for the season. We all saw that on Sunday night. Messed up his knee, I think torn patella tendon, I believe. Tremaine McBride, a DB for the Giants, is out indefinitely with a thumb injury. Not sure exactly what type of injury, but says he's out indefinitely. Philadelphia Eagles dealing with another injury from that game, which we all saw with Darren Sproles. Kind of got rolled up on and crumpled in a pile there. His knee is messed up. They do have a bye this week, so we'll have to see. I don't think we're going to get good injury information on him until next week at this time as to how much he'll miss. San Diego Chargers had a couple of injuries. Eddie Royal with ribs and Brandon Flowers with a groin. Those guys are both listed day-to-day. So will they be available for the big divisional showdown against the Chiefs? We'll have to see. San Francisco 49ers, three key injuries from Monday night's battle with the Rams. Jimmy Ward on the defense, he left the game with a quad injury. His status is uncertain. Obviously, recording this right now on Tuesday. They just played last night, so I don't know that they'll know more information about him. And Patrick Willis, he hurt his toe. He's uncertain for next week. Mike Iupati, offensive lineman, he sustained a concussion, so they got a big game up in Denver. They can't afford to be without Iupati along the line, and then Patrick Willis particularly. Also Jimmy Ward, that secondary is already pretty weak. Peyton Manning will rip them apart. Seattle Seahawks, Bobby Wagner out with a toe injury. Status is uncertain, but key linebacker for them in their Super Bowl run. And Byron Maxwell, he messed up his calf. It says week to week. I think it could be a little bit longer than that. We'll have to see. It did not look like he was reacting too well on the sideline after being injured. So, and then the Redskins, David Amerson, a DB, he sustained a concussion, so he's going to be entering the concussion program to see when he can come back. So there's your injuries off of these Week 6 games. Obviously, we'll know more closer to the start of Week 7, but these are all early things to consider when you start breaking down these games early in the week. Looking ahead to these games upcoming in Week 7, you obviously start off with the Thursday night game. Jets at the Patriots. Get to see if Geno Smith has figured out anything or if he's still trying to catch up on the latest upcoming feature films. He has not played well all season, particularly of late, and Tom Brady is really hitting stride with this offense right now. So very interested to see if the Patriots are able to continue that pace and put pressure on Smith to make some plays happen, or if this Jets defense is able to slow him down at all and slow Brady down at all and give himself an opportunity. Sunday, I think the theme here is excellent non-divisional games that actually have some decent importance behind them due to some of these records that some of these teams have, and then some stinkers thrown in there. So let's break it down. Cincinnati at Indianapolis. Both teams, the Bengals are 3-1-1. The Colts are 4-2. It's a pretty interesting game here. The Bengals, their defense has been looking like it's been getting ravaged of late. Is that real? Is that just a smokescreen? What is Indianapolis Colts and their offense going to do at home? Will they put up a performance like they've been putting up, or will they do something like they did against the Baltimore Ravens, where it's a lower scoring, closer fought game against an AFC North opponent? We'll have to see in that one, but I think it should be a good game. Obviously, a lot of playoff implications there, even at this early stage. Stinker number one is the Tennessee Titans traveling to Washington. Teams are 3-9 combined. Not really a whole lot to say about this game. I think Washington's probably better than their 1-5 record, and we'll have to see what's going on with the quarterback position at Tennessee, but it's a game that's probably not going to be featured too highly on many people's watch list. Then you have the Miami Dolphins traveling up to Chicago. Even though none of these teams have a winning record, I'm fascinated to watch this game in particular due to some of the matchups and some of the implications as a result of last week's games and who's going to lose this game, because it's really going to be detrimental for whoever loses this one big time. You've got the Miami Dolphins. They're now 2-3, trying to keep the pace in the AFC East, trying to hold get back on track to get up there towards the New England Patriots. When you think about them, you have to start looking at things, even though it's only Week 7, you have to start looking at playoff implications. And that's why we have NFL Project at our use here to go over some of these things, and certainly going to be looking at that site more and more and more. But you have the Miami Dolphins as a team that, you think about the wild card seeding. Out west in the AFC, you have the San Diego Chargers and you have the Denver Broncos, both one loss apiece. You look at the AFC North, you have the Baltimore Ravens at 4-2, you have the Cincinnati Bengals at 3-1-1. Hell, even the AFC South, Houston Texans right now are still 3-3. We know the Indianapolis Colts are leading that division at 4-2. The Dolphins are not probably, unless they really get hot and some of those teams start falling off, in that great a contention for a wild card spot. You look ahead at who they've got in their division. Buffalo's only 2-3. We know that the Jets aren't any good, and they're sitting there looking right at the New England Patriots. New England Patriots, this is a team that is 4-2. Might improve to 5-2. You got to figure out a way to catch them, because it's going to be hard to get a wild card seed coming from the AFC East, in my opinion. And then the Chicago Bears, huge performance offensively and defensively last week in Atlanta. Now they're coming back home. I think the Miami Dolphins played a very good game. I think with the coaching and game planning in the first quarter and the first, 20, 25 minutes of that game that really put them behind the pace they needed to be. They came out in the second half and really played great football. It'll be interesting to see how they respond from such a heartbreaking loss at home in the last seconds, but they played well, and both these teams are seem to be playing well at the right time here. So this is going to be a really exciting game. Thinker number 2, Cleveland at Jacksonville. Jacksonville looking for the first one of the season. Cleveland's 3-2. So they're trying to keep pace with the Baltimore Ravens and with the Cincinnati Bengals, these young kids out of Cleveland, but they lost their starting center, Alex Mack, last week. Jacksonville is known to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. I'm really excited to see in this game what Blake Bortles is able to do in the passing game, because Cleveland Browns offense can move the ball through the air. We've seen that repeatedly. If they give Brian Hoyer some time, I think he's going to be able to do some things down the field. And then when Jacksonville has the ball, what will they do against this Cleveland Browns defense? Because the Browns really shut down the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. Was that a fluke? Was it because the Steelers stink? What was going on there? Because I don't really have the Cleveland Browns defense rated highly enough to hold this Pittsburgh Steelers down to only 3 points through 3 quarters. So what kind of effort are they going to post here, and how well is Blake Bortles going to perform? Overall, not a game that a lot of people are going to watch closely, but there might be some betting opportunities in this game, and certainly be paying attention to it. When you look at the Seattle Seahawks traveling to St. Louis, this is a game both teams lost last week. Seattle coming off a heartbreaking loss at home. Now they're looking up in the division of the San Francisco 49ers, who are sitting at 4-2 and leading that division. Seattle has got to get this game in St. Louis. They're obviously at this current time favored by 6.5 or 7 points, depending where you're looking. St. Louis performed really great in the first half against the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think you can forget how well they played there. And then in the second half, their protection scheme totally unraveled for Austin Davis in the pocket, and his performance reflected that without being able to push the ball. So can Seattle get pressure on him and produce? And I think there's going to be passing opportunities for the Seattle offense against this Rams defense. We saw what Colin Kaepernick was able to do last week. The thing is, Russell Wilson off of a horrible game, probably the worst game I've ever seen him play in terms of the stats he produced. So he's really got to rebound on the road in St. Louis. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So we'll have to see how he's able to do. Then you've got another great non-divisional game, Carolina at Green Bay. Carolina really has been impressing me this year. Went into the season thinking that their defense was going to be worse and their offense was going to be worse. Turns out that their defense has been a little bit better than I suspected overall, I think, but definitely not as good as last year. And their offense has actually been better than last year in terms of producing points and scoring. Now, they've needed to do that out of necessity as a result of their defense, but the fact that they've been able to do it is surprising. I mean, they scored over 30 points against the Bears and beat them last week. They scored 37 points in Cincinnati as well just the other day. So this is a very difficult spot that they find themselves in. They're traveling to Green Bay. They got to take on the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers are going to put up some points at home. So once again, I think it's going to be a case of can Carolina chase them and can Carolina outscore them, because while Green Bay did not play as well offensively, I think the Miami Dolphins had a really good game plan defensively on ways to limit them getting after Aaron Rodgers, and I don't know at home that they're going to have the same type of struggles that in that respect with Carolina's defensive line. So it is going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Another game, excellent non-divisional game, this one non-conference, Atlanta traveling to Baltimore to play the Ravens. Very difficult spot for the Atlanta Falcons, but right now they're sitting at 2-4, and they've got fortunately for them, they've got the New Orleans Saints, who are just 2-3 and are road dogs this week as well. So they've got that going for them, but at this point in time, this division is Carolina's for the taking, and both these teams need to get victories this week, the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints, but it's going to be a tough test in Baltimore against an offense that's really rolling right now. Minnesota at Buffalo. I'll be watching this game mainly to see how Teddy Bridgewater responds and how Kyle Orton is utilized. I think the answer for both teams with these young quarterbacks are not young for Orton, but less experienced. Certainly not a top quarterback in the league right now by any stretch of the imagination, but obviously a veteran and a very inexperienced Teddy Bridgewater. These guys need to get run games to help them out. And Buffalo did not get enough rushing yards last week. They were terrible in Detroit a couple weeks ago, still earned that victory. This past week against the Patriots, they only ran for 3 yards per carry. It was 26th in the league. They need to get some run game to support and help the quarterback. And then you look at the Minnesota Vikings, they certainly need a run game. You can't have Teddy Bridgewater throwing 35 passes and on the road in particular against the Buffalo Bills and expect to win a game like that. So they're going to need to get a run game going too. So I think both these teams absolutely must establish the run and have some productivity there, or they're in for some trouble. Then you have a game that's reminiscent from playoffs a few years ago, except a different setting. This time it's in Detroit, not New Orleans. But the Saints play the Lions in a game that very, very interesting game to see. Non-divisional, but both NFC teams. And the Lions exceeding expectations, getting it done defensively. Last week, no Megatron in there, and we saw what that affected the offense. 4.7 yards per attempt, 27th in the league. They could not run the ball either, and this was against the Vikings. We know that the Saints defense is not nearly a top 10, top 15 defense this year, but off of a bye, they've got to have worked on some things to try to figure out a way to stop this Detroit Lions offense without Calvin Johnson, because every single team has been able to limit the Detroit Lions offense without Calvin Johnson. Even the Minnesota Vikings last week, when Teddy Bridgewater did absolutely nothing, this team punted the ball 7 times. Bridgewater had just the most abysmal yards per pass, passer rating. They couldn't run the ball at all. And Detroit still only put up 17 points on the scoreboard. They only got into the Vikings red zone 3 times. So Detroit's offense is not all that productive without Calvin Johnson in there. And now they're going to have to try to keep pace with New Orleans in that offense. And the way to do that is to slow down Drew Brees. Drew Brees in that offense has been good, but now they're without Jimmy Graham on the road. I think both these defenses are going to have to step up in this game. So it's going to be an interesting game to see. Both teams really would love to win. It's bigger for the Saints, though, but Detroit at this point in the season is a better team. But without number one favorite targets for both these quarterbacks, I'm going to be fascinated to see which one performs the best. Then you've got two great divisional games here to kick off our 4 o'clock late day slate. Kansas City at San Diego. New York Giants at Dallas. Interesting how parallel these games are. The home team is favored in both. The home team in both is 5-1. The road team in both has 3 losses. Kansas City's 2-3. The Giants are 3-3. Kansas City was off a bye. San Diego escaped Oakland with a victory. I'm sure they'll take it. Their defense needs some work, and they'll have to see how they bear out against the Kansas City Chiefs. Then you have the Giants. Off of a game, they didn't even show up, I think, in all reality. No halftime adjustments, no way to figure out how to stop that defense. Now you're playing Dallas, who's playing extremely efficiently on both sides of the ball off of a great performance. Could there be any type of letdown? What in the world happened to New York after 2 great weeks of efficiency? Their protection wasn't there, but then they stopped being able to play defense. They could not play offense last week against the Eagles. Was that just a terrible performance, or was that a sign of things to come? So both these games I'm fascinated to watch on Sunday afternoon. Then you throw in Arizona-Oakland. I think this game's going to be very intriguing, even though you have an 0-5 Oakland Raiders team versus a 4-1 Arizona Cardinals team. I see, especially with Carson Palmer in there, some opportunities for the Oakland Raiders to do something in this game. Very impressed with the way that offense performed last week against the San Diego Chargers, and we know what Arizona's problems are. They were not able to make any big plays down the field, which has been their MO when Carson Palmer was not there and Drew Stanton was. It was really opening up some things, so they have not been able to complete those. And then they are very inefficient when it gets into the red zone. So I see some opportunities maybe for Oakland to steal their first victory. Who knows if that's how it plays out? I have no idea where I'm going to find myself involved in this game side or total, or if I'll sit it out. But I think Oakland could be a live home dog in this one, though home dogs have not fared too well, particularly last weekend. You've got the primetime game Sunday night, San Francisco at Denver. Really tough spot for San Francisco. Obviously, great win last week, Monday, against the Rams. On the road in primetime, now a short week, having to go in primetime again in Denver. I think you'll find a different type of crowd there. I think the crowd up in St. Louis was a little bit more timid. This crowd up in Denver is going to be a little bit more feisty. They've got one loss. They're really trying to, I'm sure they want to go after Harbaugh and get this victory. And it's going to be an interesting game because it's going to be vital for both teams. I think Denver is, at this point, trying to fend off San Diego. Denver really wants to win that division, of course. They want to secure home field advantage. It's very important for this team to get that extra advantage of playing in the mile-high air late in the winter in the playoffs, and they cannot afford to be going out to sunny San Diego if that were to be the case. So they've got to keep pace. And then 49ers obviously trying to fend off the Seattle Seahawks, fight for the division, which they're leading right now, as well as ensure that they'll get a wild card spot. So never too early to think about the playoffs. I think that game's going to be intriguing. And then speaking of the playoffs, a true can't-lose game here, Pittsburgh versus Houston. The reality is, with the way these two teams are built, there are inefficiencies on both sides of the ball. I think both deserve to lose, only because I don't think either should be a team with a winning record at this point in time. But one of them is probably going to win, unless we get a tie, of course, and both of them need the win. If you look at Pittsburgh, every single other team in their division has a winning record. Even Cleveland is a 3-2, and Cleveland just stomped them last week. And you look at Houston. Houston was manhandled by the Indianapolis Colts. If they fall to 3-4, it's going to be very hard to compete, as I mentioned earlier, in that AFC to get a wild card spot. When you talk about some of the teams in the West and the North, all very, very good teams with good records from a number of those teams. And you really have to look at trying to win the AFC South to make the playoffs, I think, this year in particular. And that means having a better record than the Indianapolis Colts and somehow beating Indianapolis in Indianapolis later this year. So big game for the Houston Texans and a huge game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think a loss here, not that I really had super high hopes for either of these teams heading in. I was a little bit more down on Houston than some of the guys were. Really impartial on Pittsburgh this year. Didn't really know what to expect from them. With the injuries, the defense is sustained and the offense not really playing very well. I can commiserate a little bit with Snoop Dogg and his opinions of their offensive coordinator at this point in time. And Steelers really can't afford to lose this game with that division stacked the way that it is. So should be interesting only to watch from a desperation angle on Monday night. But if you're looking for some really great football and high efficiency, it's not really going to happen on Monday night rather in that game. And with that wraps up the Week 7 edition of the Rearview Mirror podcast. We tackled every single game, every single outcome from last week, why teams won and why they lost. We also looked ahead to the card this upcoming weekend, really tried to analyze high level some of these matchups and intrigue factors for some of these games, what to look for. Certainly encourage you to get onto the mailing list, sign up for the newsletter that comes out, because I send out a newsletter called Inside the Isolator. Every single Saturday night gets you up to date on all of the advanced analytics and metrics you need to know in terms of matchups and whatnot for the upcoming games on Sunday. Of course, that's free, and you're going to want to check that out. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll catch you next week for the Week 8 edition. Good luck this weekend.
This is gonna be a fun ride. This is gonna be a fun ride. Everybody one clap. I'm gonna play when I wanna play, do what I wanna do. I'm gonna say what I wanna say. Did I say anything stupid today? My role is to take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. Take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. If I can't get to it, no everybody can't get to it. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. Everybody one clap, one clap, one clap, one clap.